Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Bruce Ellis, and I'm the local organizer for this conference. I guess I'm the person that everyone in this room probably knows. And first off, welcome. I am so excited to have all of you here. I think that the group of people that we have here is just amazing. I'm not sure I've ever seen quite a group like this before, because we have, assembled in this room right now, in this relatively small room, we have a group of absolutely outstanding world-class scientists who are here to talk about adolescence and the implications of evolutionary theory for thinking about adolescent policy and prevention. And we also have really well-placed community people who are really actively involved in working with adolescents, influencing adolescent policy, and who work doing interventions with adolescents. And so this is really a unique opportunity over these next 2 days to try to bring these two worlds together. Because as we all know, prevention and policy is not always closely informed by science, and scientists don't always do a good enough job communicating to a larger public and sharing their work. Sometimes it gets shared with other scientists and doesn't always go beyond those bounds. So this is a chance, I think a remarkable chance, hopefully, for integration and for trying to build something larger. As I mentioned at the dinner last night, but I'll just say again that this workshop is really part of a process. This is not a single, we don't see this as a single isolated event, but we really hope to bring people together on an ongoing basis and produce products that will go well beyond this workshop. And much of what we have scheduled is we have both sessions where people are going to give talks and present content-based research and ideas. And then also, we are going to have discussion time built in where we really try to talk about the implications of this work, the implications for science, the implications for policy and prevention. So we're going to try to pull those things together as we go throughout the workshop. We have a morning session. You guys should have all had the final copy of the agenda there, but we have a morning session which is entitled Ultimate Evolutionary Conceptions of Adolescent Risk Behavior, where three of us are going to kind of try to frame some of the big picture questions. And then we have an afternoon session today, which is our approximate conception, which is going to be more at the mechanistic level, getting underneath the skin. Okay, but before all that, David Sloan Wilson, who is the co-director of the Evolution Institute, is also going to give some introductory and opening remarks. Before I turn it over to David, I do just want to say a couple of thank yous. First off, this event could not have begun to happen without the tremendous energy and organization and help of Carmen Chan. Carmen can be waiting for she's really made this happen. So any of you who have organized the conference know how incredibly much work it is. So thank you to Carmen. Also, thank you to Nina. Nina, can you wave back there? Nina works with the McClellan Institute, and she is a public relations person, and she has been doing a lot of the work to try to get attention to this conference and to help us think about how to package this. And so Nina's been working closely with us. So thank you very much, and we'll continue as well. And of course, the other, of course, very indebted to both of the institutes that are sponsoring this conference. So very indebted to the Evolution Institute, who got behind this idea from the beginning and who found a way to fund this conference and to bring these people together and thought that this was an important enough topic. So to Jerry Lieberman and to David, the co-directors, very indebted. And then also, thanks to all of the people at the Francis McClellan Institute, to Stephen and to Soyed, and of course to Carmen and Nina and everyone who's here, who also have been behind this conference and have been funding it, been helping to fund it and helping to organize it. So thank you.
All right. That's great. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and let's start right in. Keep on schedule here, except that's not going to happen if I don't have this little thing here.
What little thing do you...
It needs a little USB drive. I can just do it this way. That's not a problem. But Okay, so I'm going to have to reach over here, but okay, so evolutionary theory, continuous development in the biological sciences ever since Darwin, but interrupted development in relation to human affairs. And I think the most striking fact about the study of risky adolescent behavior from an evolutionary perspective is how new it is, how extraordinarily new it is. And that's also true for most other subjects from an evolutionary perspective, mostly within the last 10 or 15 years. Do you have the little USB drive for this? This thing needs to be...
Oh, sorry.
Aha!
I was wondering what that was for.
Okay, now we're good. Nope, except we have this problem now. Okay, so still? No, I'm just going to do away with it. Forget it. Forget it. That's no problem.
I have one if you want.
Oh, now what's going on here?
Slip this in, I could.
Okay. So what I'm here for is to give you the big picture of why it is that the study of all things human from an evolutionary perspective became interrupted and how it can resume. So that's true for adolescent risk behavior plus more. And a good way to begin is by focusing on this single person here, Sir Julian Huxley, grandson of Darwin's bulldog, preeminent evolutionist in his own right, one of the framers of the modern synthesis. His book was subtitled The Modern Synthesis in 1942. Also a passionate humanist, secular humanist. He was a common ancestor of Jerry and myself, and wrote a lot more about humanism than he did about evolution. And one of the interesting things about going back to this period of history was the expansive optimism that people had. Not just evolutionists, but everyone had this kind of progressive view about the capacity of humankind to better itself, basically. And Huxley was certainly among them. Here's a quote from Huxley, the secular humanist. There is no separate supernatural realm. All phenomena are part of one basic process of evolution. There is no basic cleavage between science and religion. I believe that a drastic reorganization of our pattern of religious thought is now becoming necessary from a God-centered to an evolutionary-centered pattern. Doesn't that sound as if Richard Dawkins could have written that book? Even I could have written a passage such as this. Well, here's another passage from Huxley, the secular humanist. The lowest strata are reproducing too fast. Therefore, they must not have too easy access to relief or hospital treatment, lest the removal of the last check on natural selection should make it too easy for children to be produced or to survive. Long unemployment should be a ground for sterilization. And so welcome to the wonderful world of social Darwinism. It's so extraordinary that optimistic and expansive and, in a sense, well-meaning people, such as Huxley, and he was not alone, could develop their ideas in that way, to improve the human condition in a way that, from our standpoint, from anyone's standpoint, is highly non-egalitarian, and which led to social policies that are shameful in retrospect. So commonsensical was it back then that this actually led to social policies along these lines. So this, of course, is one major reason why the study of evolution in relation to human affairs became interrupted. But while we're talking about social Darwinism, let's also talk about social engineering, because I say the word social engineering to just about anyone, and it invokes a creepy reaction, regardless of whether evolution is involved. And other forms of social engineering that were motivated, for example, by radical behaviorism also led to policies that are shameful in retrospect. So part of what we need to do is to ask, why is it that social engineering, what is it about it that's so horrifying, and how can it become more benign? That's a big question, but I actually think it has a simple answer. And as Bill Clinton might put it, it's about mutual consent, stupid. Social engineering becomes horrifying when it involves some people influencing the welfare of others without their consent. And it becomes benign when it involves deciding to do something on the basis of mutual consent. People are horrified by the idea of having their fate determined by other people for the best of reasons. And this is a deeply evolutionary issue, that human social behavior is only possible thanks to strong social control. And the reason that we became so different from other primate species is because of mutual control that was possible in our species and our species alone. And so this confines acceptable social policy solutions to those which are by mutual consent. And furthermore, doing nothing is not an option. I think one of the first lessons you need to learn about evolution, if you don't know it already, and there'll be many examples that emerge in this workshop, is that what counts as adaptive in evolutionary terms is not necessarily socially desirable. So in the first place, not everything about evolution is adaptive in any sense. That was Stephen Jay Gould's theme. And in the second place, even when it does count as adaptive in an evolutionary sense, it's not necessarily socially desirable. And so therefore, doing nothing is not an option. There's no alternative to managing our social environment. And I don't think we need to be coy about calling that social engineering or not. So evolutionary theory, I think, is what brings us up today. It offers an essential set of tools for managing our social environment in ways that we can agree upon by consensus. And so that makes all forms of social engineering benign, and evolutionary theory a toolbox. We often call it a toolkit, a set of tools for simply improving and managing our social environment. Now, another reason why the study of all things human from an evolutionary perspective was interrupted was the allure of minimalistic theories such as behaviorism in psychology and rational choice theory in economics that promise to explain the length and breadth of human nature on the basis of just a few minimalistic principles. And if this promise was fulfilled, who would need to know about evolution? Who cares about deep history if we can explain all we need to explain on the basis of such things as operant conditioning or utility maximizing? So there's a sense in which these minimalistic theories had to fail in order for the need for evolutionary theory to reassert itself. I think that happened quite a while ago for radical behaviorism, although radical behaviorism is still a very important part of the mix. And Dennis Embry, who I don't think is here but will be, and Tony Biglan, who unfortunately couldn't come for medical reasons, but both of them represent the field of behavior analysis and prevention science, and Pet to a degree also, in which behaviorism is still a very important part of the story. And with economic theory, this is just happening right now. I mean, there is such incredible soul searching about the failure of economic theory to predict human behavior and what to do about it. And another workshop that we're putting on in a couple of weeks addresses that issue. So, for whatever reason, to summarize, evolutionary theory has become a unifying theoretical framework and a sophisticated science for the study of all other species. Jerry was saying at dinner last night, Dobzhansky's oft-quoted statement, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, coined in the 1970s. And the human-related sciences became sophisticated in their own right, but developed as many dozens of separate disciplines that are not unified, with no unified framework. And in Evolution for Everyone, I say that the ivory tower should be called the ivory archipelago. Many islands of thought with very little communication among islands. And I think all of us are familiar with the fragmentation of knowledge. You know, it's really extraordinary. And the more I get into it, the more amazed I am that there's entire fields out there that any one person doesn't even know about. So great is the fragmentation of knowledge. And so doing for all things human what has been done, and of course that's still in progress, for all things biology, is what really can be dated to the late 20th century. That's how recent it is. And it's going on at different paces at the level of research, education, and policy. I think it's already in full swing at the level of research and scholarship. it lags in higher education and lags still further in public policy. And so starting in 2003, I decided it was important to go beyond my personal research and become involved in programmatic activities. So I started an evolutionary studies program at my university at 2003. And then, thanks to Jerry, we started the Evolution Institute in 2007 as programmatic efforts basically to do something about this in higher education and public policy, respectively. I'm just going to touch on each of these three areas very quickly on our way to our main event here of public policy. So in the first place, you name it, it's being studied. As I said last night, very briefly, this is a very exciting time to be an intellectual. It is just everything you can imagine, every topic you can imagine. The humanities, in addition to the human-related sciences, is being studied from an evolutionary perspective. On this side are books written by the people in this room. And this is just a sample of many dozens and dozens and dozens of books, academic and very high-quality trade books on all things human from an evolutionary perspective. I purposely put some things in the humanities. There's Shakespeare and the Nature of Love, Homer from an evolutionary perspective, and Catherine Coe, who's not here yet, but is coming, her wonderful book on visual art from an evolutionary perspective. And so I mean, this is so wonderful. Business as usual. If you're an evolutionary biologist, you know that you can go from organism to organism, insects to birds to primates, subject to subject, aggression to foraging to speciation. And you can do that at a professional level because everything is being talked about in terms of the same basic principles of evolution. The same toolkit basically is being applied to all of these different subjects. Just imagine what it's like to do that for any topic that you can imagine for humans. That's the unifying factor for evolution. And yet for higher education, around the world, evolution is still taught as a biological subject at virtually all colleges and universities worldwide. I don't know of scarcely any suggestions. You can bear me out on this. The faculty, such as the people in this room that are at the forefront of the research integration, often feel isolated within their own departments at universities. At best, they have a center or a cluster of faculty, and that's very nice with them and their students, but it's invisible to the rest of the university. So what would it be like if all human-related subjects were taught, in addition to biology, was taught from an evolutionary perspective from the very beginning? Welcome to EVOS, first campus-wide program. I'm just going to flash through this because on our way to public policy, but last year we got NSF funding to expand into a nationwide consortium. We have groups at 40 universities worldwide that are interested in starting EVOS programs, including Kansas and Arizona. So if you want to learn more about this, then type EVOS into Google and you can learn a lot about this. So now I think that this integration is starting to take place thanks to programmatic efforts such as this one. Okay, evolution and public policy. We all know this dreary fact, right? Politicians don't dare to utter the E word. You remember when the Republican candidates were lined up on that stage and somebody asked them who believes in evolution? Those poor things were just trapped. And their advisors on human-related subjects, as we have seen, themselves have no evolutionary training and very well might have fresh memories of social Darwinism. And so there is currently no mechanism for publicizing the practical relevance of evolutionary theory and focusing evolutionary expertise on issues relevant to human welfare in the real world. There's no conduit for this tremendously important body of theory to be connected to public policy, and there's nothing even remotely comparable to the Discovery Institute, which is well-oiled and well-funded to spread disinformation, misinformation about evolution until now. And so Jerry here, my co-director, and I started the Evolution Institute in 2007. And it's becoming very well established in a very short amount of time. Ed Wilson is an enthusiastic member of our executive board, and we're in the process of forming a very large advisory board, which we think of as a skill pool, basically, of evolutionists that we can draw upon for general advice and specific expertise on a topic such as this one. So our mission is to use evolutionary science to solve real-world problems. Through this advisory board, we can identify and assemble evolutionary expertise on virtually any topic relevant to human welfare, organize workshops, position papers, advisors, and assist in the implementation of the policies that we formulate. So back to this point that Bruce makes, and we want to make again and again, this is not a standalone workshop. This is part of a process. And the outcome of the workshop is supposed to be a work plan, basically, for us to move forward and to implement the recommendations that emerge from this workshop. So please, please keep that in mind, is that we really have a long-term commitment to this process. And so this is the starting gun. And we want our marching orders, basically. And the people in this room, the participants, and the people that are listening to this, of course, your obligation ends when the workshop is over. We cannot engage you longer than that. But we hope and we expect that actually what we come up with is so appealing and so much what you already would like to do that we will simply be facilitating your efforts so much that you will join us in the continuing effort. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. This is our second workshop. The first was on childhood education last year. Bruce was at that, and it was on the strength of that Bruce said, I want to do this for risky adolescent behavior. And then when the financial crisis hit, one of our patrons said, well, David, what can evolution say about this? And so we girded our loins, and we have a very ambitious conference taking place in only a couple of weeks on what evolution can say about human regulatory systems, the regulation of large-scale human social interactions. And that is going to be quite an experience. Now, and then the Evolution Institute is linked to the other programmatic efforts of mine. I've already talked about the EVOS Consortium. I also have a programmatic effort for using our whole entire city as a field site for evolutionary research, and that can be used as a demonstration site, basically, for some of the ideas that emerge from these workshops. And I'm very heavily involved in the study of religion from an evolutionary perspective. So anytime social policy bears upon religion, we're there with a very ambitious program for studying religion from an evolutionary perspective. Okay, so I'm going to finish up with just a few thoughts to prepare us for studying the specific topic of risky adolescent behavior. So first, it's kind of audacious to think that for any major policy issue, such as childhood education or risky adolescent behavior, that here's all this concern and goodwill that's already gone into it. Everyone wants to educate their kids. Everyone wants to avoid risky adolescent behavior. Tons of research, tons of money, many attempts at intervention. So how is it that given all of this effort, that a new theoretical perspective can offer something that's new? And my best way for answering this is this wonderful quote from Darwin's autobiography. If you've heard me talk before, you might have heard this quote. But this is from, he's recalling back to when he was a young man taking a field trip with his professor, Sedgwick. They've gone to a valley in Wales, and they're looking for fossils. But that was dumb, because this valley was scoured by glaciers. There's no fossils there at all. And Darwin says, we spent many hours in Cumidwal examining all the rocks with extreme care, as Sedgwick was anxious to find fossils in them. But neither of us saw a trace of the wonderful glacial phenomena all around us. We did not notice the plainly scored rocks, the perched boulders, the lateral and terminal moraines. Yet these phenomena are so conspicuous that a house burnt down by fire did not tell its story more plainly than did this valley. If it had still been filled by a glacier, the phenomena would have been less distinct than they are now. And the reason I love this quote is because it demonstrates the need for a theory to see what is in front of our faces. Before the theory of glaciation, all the evidence was simply invisible. After the theory, the evidence was so plain that the glacier might as well have been there. And so you need a theory. If you don't have a theory, then you just have complete disorganization, which is very anxiety-provoking. If you have the wrong theory, it organizes your perception, but it leads to dead-end solutions. If you have the right theory, then everything falls into place. And so I like the phrase, the transformation of the obvious. Nothing is less obvious than the concept of obvious, because so much depends on background conditions. And what happens, I think, again and again when a topic is approached from an evolutionary perspective is that there's a transformation of the obvious. And things that were not obvious before all of a sudden become like the evidence for glaciers all around us. So this has been true for all of these past events, and I think this is what's taking place in a large scale for evolution, for human behavior from an evolutionary perspective, and then at a smaller scale for a topic such as risky adolescent behavior. So we will see if a transformation of the obvious takes place during this workshop. Okay, I want to say just a bit about trade-offs between basic research and practical applications, because so often a negative trade-off is imagined, as if basic research is curiosity-driven, and then ultimately it trickles down and becomes practically useful. And I think that what's interesting about evolution is that it's fundamentally about the relationship between organisms and their environments. And so that means that the best basic scientific research on humans from an evolutionary perspective is on people from all walks of life as they go about their lives, as in Mark's wonderful work, in relation to their environments. And guess what? That kind of research is also the most relevant to solving the real-world problems of life. We have many examples of that. When I study the city of Binghamton, that's not just interesting from a basic scientific perspective, but that's immediately relevant to improving the quality of our lives in the city of Binghamton. So that means that we don't have to wait, as we're thinking about how to think about this subject from a basic scientific perspective. We do not have to wait to apply it. We can apply it immediately to our real-world situations. And next point, it is not necessary to reach a consensus on every issue. Study of all human-related subjects, as I've said, is new, therefore nascent, therefore all kinds of uncertainty that we're in the process of sorting out. This came up at the education workshop in a really interesting way, where a disagreement arose as to whether a topic such as math, which was kind of newfangled, right? Math did not exist in the ancestral environment. So maybe learning math is inherently different and more difficult than learning other topics, okay, that are more typical of the ancestral environment. David Geary is a proponent of this position. Well, Peter Gray, another person at the workshop, said, I don't think so. We're a cultural species, and all cultures have to learn all kinds of stuff. So what is the difference between learning your multiplication tables and an Aborigine boy learning the songlines of his ancestors? And so it might be that actually something like math can be learned as spontaneously as learning is natural in a sense. Well, this is an unsettled issue. But that's what we should be identifying. It's not a failure of the process to identify an issue such as this. So this is not, we're not here to have a love fest. And if we end up disagreeing in a substantive way, that's actually what we want to do. That's a positive outcome. If there's substantive issues that we need to clarify, then that is a positive outcome. It is not a failure of the process. And finally, with usefulness comes acceptance. I think the reason why we accept physics and chemistry and not evolution, or many people do, is not because physics and chemistry is better supported by empirical evidence. It's because we need them and we use them every day. And evolution will be accepted as soon as we use it and need it every day. And so there's an interesting sense in which we could actually transform the acceptance of evolution in the general public in the course of our primary mission, which is just to apply evolution to everyday life. So now that we have the big picture in mind, let's proceed to the specific study of risky adolescent behavior. Thank you.
Take some questions.
If we have time, then we have a little break now. Is that right?
No, after my talk's a little break.
Okay. So a couple questions, and then while we switch.
It was kind of a framing talk.
Oh no, you have to wait. You have to count to 10 before you see if there's any
David,
questions.
could you give an example of, from the early childhood, how we were able to use the consensus paper in the case of a community to get buy-in as far as trying some of the 10 natural truths of nature?
Well, that workshop has resulted, among other things, in a short paper called "Learning from Mother Nature about Teaching Our Children: 10 Simple Truths about Education from an Evolutionary Perspective," which boils down some of the basic insights that emerged from the workshop. And that has been effective at implementing some of these practices in demonstration projects, which we're now trying to do. And just to give you an example of the kind of transformation of the obvious phenomenon in the case of education, if you look at how education takes place, and certainly in hunter-gatherer societies and many traditional societies, what you find is that there's almost nothing that resembles formal education. There's a lot of information being transmitted, but it's not in the form of adults teaching children. Basically, kids want to become adults. They're very highly motivated to learn what it takes to become an adult. And younger kids want to be like older kids. And so a lot of the education that takes place is younger kids learning from older kids. And so mixed-aged interaction turns out to be absolutely profound and important for this kind of spontaneous education. And furthermore, it tends to restrict, this is very relevant to this workshop. And Peter, if Peter was here, he would make this point. If you age segregate interaction so that kids are interacting only with people of exactly their same age, you bring out the competitive and the status rivalry and the aggression. If you're a 14-year-old interacting only with 14-year-olds, watch out. But if you're a 14-year-old embedded with 18-year-olds and 10-year-olds, then you can't dominate the 18-year-olds, and the 10-year-olds are asking you about stuff, and it all turns in a cooperative direction. That makes eminent sense in retrospect. And yet, because we're so driven by our ideas, basically, that if you're not thinking along those lines, of course we should age segregate. It makes sense, it's efficient, whatever. And so we do these things, and there's these unforeseen consequences. It's not in our minds to connect the dots, and we get dysfunctional outcomes without even knowing it. So I think that, and there were a lot of that kind of insight that came out. AJ.
One point of clarification about your talk. You said how the evolutionary approach to human affairs got interrupted historically, and then you told the Julian Huxley story. Were you gently implying that the controversy over social Darwinism is what interrupted the progress of evolution in human affairs?
I think in the first place it's a complex story, so I don't want to oversimplify it. But I think that, yes, certainly. I think that social Darwinism, anyone who disagreed with that kind of social policy, they could have said two things. They could say, I don't think this is the way to do it, and evolutionary theory doesn't necessarily imply that. Or they could distance themselves with the theory along with the social policy. And that's much that was happened, is basically evolution became stigmatized by being associated with social Darwinism. And that, I think, is not the whole story, but a very important part of the story, is my interpretation. Does that accord with what you would?
Oh yeah, I agree, but I wanted a clarification because you didn't quite.
Yeah, thank you for